All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As Andrea said, this is Advocacy in Uncertain Times. We're going to do this a little different than we've done some of the other panels. This is going to be more of a Q&A, a discussion, conversation. I sent them all a list of questions, but I said also, since I want this to be a discussion, if there's one question that sort of leads to other questions and we end up talking about one question the whole time, then that's what we're going to do. So we'll just see where this goes. So I'm going to introduce our panel first. So first we have Garrett May, JD, co-chair of the legislative team of ALS. Garrett May is a lifelong Utahn. That's hard to say. Who fell in love with DC when he moved out here for law school. He's a proud girl dad with his wife Jocelyn and their 2 young daughters. When Garrett is not practicing immigration law, he enjoys finding hidden gems in the city and exploring the East Coast. Garrett found ALS advocacy when his younger brother Ryan was diagnosed at the age of 21. Garrett became a co-chair of the legislative affairs team after burying Ryan while studying for the bar exam. Richard Bedlack. I'm going to move on. Is that okay? He's a cool dude in a cool suit. Dr. Peggy Plews-Ogan, MD, Brodie Professor of Medicine, University of Virginia. Dr. Peggy Plews-Ogan is a professor of medicine at the University of Virginia and was primary caregiver for her husband, Jim, who was diagnosed with ALS in 2021. Ever since his diagnosis, Peggy and Jim have been strong advocates for ALS care and research. In 2021, they founded the Hummingbird Fund to enhance care for ALS patients, support research for care, and advance policy that addresses access to treatments, funding for research, and improved care for PALS. Jim passed away in July 2024, but Peggy carries on his work with the Hummingbird Fund and as a board member of ALS. Randy Gregory, Jr., co-chair of Many Shades of ALS, ALS, should be on Zoom. His name is Randy Gregory. He was diagnosed with sporadic ALS in 2011. He has 5 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Prior to ALS, he worked as a special agent with IRS criminal investigation and community college basketball coach at CCBC Cantonsville. Considering the climate surrounding the potential funding cuts and healthcare-related clinical research, he thinks advocating for the ALS community is imperative. Deb Winters, founder, Deborah's for Hope Tomorrow. Deb has been living life abundantly since her ALS diagnosis in March 22. She knew immediately that the Lord numbers her days, not statistics, and she would use every day to make a difference. Deborah's Hope for Tomorrow was born from the knowledge that hope is difficult to find in an ALS diagnosis, and a life without hope and purpose was not one she chose to live. I think that just spins right off of Dr. Bedlack's work, so I think that's incredible. So as this topic was coming up and the title for this, I was thinking a little bit about how to get started with some of these questions. And I realized that in the past few months, I've been hearing a lot of folks say, I don't want to get political, but. I also know that the personal is political and all politics is local. Folks sometimes refer to big P politics and small p politics. Small p politics is about how we live together, sharing space, resources, and rules that govern us. So policy and practice, if you will. When you are sharing your support or opposition of a policy or a practice, you are advocating, or you're an advocate. It's that simple. The title of this panel is Advocacy in Uncertain Times. The political landscape feels uncertain, and separating facts from fiction may seem harder than ever. So why does it feel uncertain? It's not unusual for a new administration to seek policy changes or want to reduce federal spending. In fact, many voters may have wanted and expected that. It's not unusual for one party to control both Congress and White House. What feels different now is the pace of change across federal departments and the court filings in response to those policy shifts. Reduced staffing at federal agencies is already affecting our community. Halts in research funding has caused universities to lay off staff. Proposed cuts to health funding and changes in health policy have direct consequences for scientific research, healthcare access, and the ALS community. Now, over 100 days into the new administration, what must advocates do, And how do we ensure ALS research and the quality of life remain top priorities of our elected officials? So hang on, because we're about to get political. First question to Garrett and anyone who wants to answer. What pieces of federal legislation are out there giving you hope in a better future for those living with ALS?
Well, I have to start by acknowledging that Jack Silva abandoned me here today. He's the other one of our three musketeers on the IMLS Ledge Affairs team. And so I'm trying to speak for two voices here, but Jack is hopefully getting better from his cold back at home in San Francisco. And I'm an immigration lawyer, so I have no punching. I will never say I'm sorry for being political, but my work is just the law and the politics are tied up together, and what the public in the U.S. thinks about immigration impacts my day to day. So I see two channels that I try to focus on with ALS and a system that doesn't work for the disease, and immigration and a system that doesn't work for people trying to cross borders. But in the ALS channel, there is legislation that I think is a hope-boosting indicator that we have, which is the aptly named Promising Pathway Act. Now, it's not an existing piece of legislation in that a new version of the bill has not yet been introduced in this session of Congress, but there was a version of the Promising Pathway Act in the 116th Congress, the 117th, the 118th, and so now we're hoping with the 119th to continue refining and iterating on this legislation that provides an alternative, new, more flexible or more accommodating pathway for provisional approval through the FDA for treatments that show promise, that show a degree of efficacy and safety that can be offered to patients with rapidly progressing or rare or terminal diseases like ALS. And I think, ironically, right now might be a really good time for something like the Promising Pathway Act. And I, of course, am speaking only for myself, not for the LEDGE team or for IMALS or any other organization, but I think we have a window to maybe capture some of the frustration with government and the focus on efficiency and the need to maybe challenge some of the bureaucracy that is in place, and to use individuals like former Senator Vance, who was a co-sponsor on the previous version of the bill, to look at things that maybe an agency like the FDA might not want to implement itself, but which can nevertheless be imposed upon them in the way of a Promising Pathway Act, and teaching them that there is more than their standard approval. There's more than the traditional approach that they've taken to getting things done that will benefit citizens and people living with ALS. So the Promising Pathway Act gives me hope. We have a sub-team that's been working on that. We used to have the great leadership from Peggy and working with Tim Tobin. And I remember when I first came to ALS Advocacy, learning about the Promising Pathway Act at the same time as the Act for ALS, and the fact that the community has not given up on that bill. We got one through, we got the Act for ALS, and we'll have a chance to do that again this session of Congress, but continuing the legacy of when it was first introduced and when other advocates like Corey Pullen were working on it, or hearing Brian and Sandra talk about it in congressional testimony. The Promising Pathway Act, I don't think is going anywhere. I think it's a solution that we found that we're going to keep working for, and we're going to keep using that as a jumping off point for hope in changing the law.
Did anybody else want to throw in a piece of legislation that you find hope in? If you can't think one right now, we can come back to it too.
Not with piece of legislation. There are ways I find a lot of hope right now, but go ahead if you have a piece of legislation.
Yeah, no, I was just going to point back to the Act for ALS. I mean, we still have money that's been promised, to improve things at the NIH, also to fund expanded access programs, which to me are a really important source of hope for my patients, but also for me. I mean, if you ever saw the movie The Dallas Buyers Club, it's a great introduction to what expanded access is and why it's so important. there's never going to be a time when most people are going to be able to get into a clinical trial. It's just, I mean, the companies don't see this as a space where there's a lot of money to be made. They see it as a huge risk. So there's never going to be a lot of companies in this space. The ones that come into the space, they look back over the last few years and they say, what did those trials look like that got drugs approved? And so those were very restrictive trials. So the vast majority of people with ALS, I don't think there will come a time when most of them can be in a trial. So the next best thing is to get drugs that we're excited enough to put into trials, but get them to people that don't qualify for the trials, and into those protocols, build things where we can learn at least about safety and tolerability and biomarkers. We can't learn as much as we learn in a trial, but we can learn. So to me, it's a win-win. It's just there's never been a lot of money for those, and we finally have some money for those.
I'd say the other piece to that that's really hopeful is that it's starting to stimulate things like the public-private partnerships, the expectation that people collaborate around both drug development, research, and most importantly, that they engage patients in every step of this process. So it's pushing an idea that I think, although it's nascent, I think it's a really important first step to getting that to happen across the board.
Question back there.
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Hi, everyone. I have a question that is not wearing my ALS network hat, but just a general question for you, Garrett, about the promising pathways. I wanted to ask if you feel any concern about potentially challenging the way that, or the bureaucracy with the FDA because of the administration we have right now. So if we draw any attention to it and they're already in a position to try and change the infrastructure and call out ways in which things aren't working, do you have any concern about broader implications of what that could do by challenging it? I'm more so just curious about your thoughts and if you guys are internally having conversations about the delicate time we're in with this new administration.
Yeah, I think the dialogue that we have on our team and with other advocates is just trying to, I think, check our instincts or our ambitions with some of the professionals that we have access to by talking with our new VP Dustin or some of the consultants that we work with here in town to make sure that how can we get the positive done that we want in terms of, okay, how can the FDA be more efficient or reduce some bureaucracy that's hurting patients, but not also then lose support that we might have from one political party, or also unintentionally further some of the cuts that we've seen, both in funding and also in employment of researchers. I mean, we have, at Harvard Medical School, there was a grant cut for ALS research. There's an NIH researcher that was working on Parkinson's that got fired, in amidst the DOJ chaos. And so trying to find that balance, I think, recognizing that we have all the passion, but we don't have 20 years of political expertise necessarily. So let's talk to people that do have that and see how can we work with this opportunity, but not contribute to maybe some of the damage that, in my opinion, is also being done. But this is a time of uncertainty and odd bedfellows. I mean, just in April, the new FDA commissioner, Makary, I never remember how to pronounce his name. He's talking about exercising greater regulatory flexibility than the previous commissioner did. He's, on record talking about a new pathway for rare or incurable diseases. I don't know what exactly he has in mind, if it's something like the Promising Pathway Act, but you see those words in a quotation in a scientific journal piece, okay, interesting. So I think trying to just read the wind with some professional help, and then being ready to act when it seems like there's an opening there.
I'm actually going to take a question to Deb and Randy. How do ALS advocates stay motivated during this seemingly challenging time? Is Randy keyed up?
He uses the eye gaze device, so okay. All right.
He's ready, sounds like, yeah?
When he's ready, yeah, he can hear it.
Okay, great. If you want to go first, Deb?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I'm not sure how I made it on this panel, but nonetheless, Debba's Hope for Tomorrow was founded in the fact that if you don't have hope, if you don't have a purpose, if you don't see a reason to make a difference, then you're probably not going to make a difference, and you're probably not going to stick around long in order to do that. I live in West Virginia. We have 3 clinics in West Virginia, and yet it's incredibly difficult to find support in a very rural state that has challenges with transportation, has challenges getting to those clinics. And so here I am as a big fish in a little pond. And that's how I'm working at this, because I believe that relationship makes a difference. You're not apologizing for being political. I was a pastor before I had to step down off the platform because I didn't have the energy to be a full-time pastor. I don't apologize for that either. And so to develop a relationship and to have relationships with other folks, it's amazing to be here. But if you are living in the coal fields of West Virginia, finding someone else who's living with ALS can be a challenge, certainly can be a challenge to get to them. And so we concentrate on one-on-one relationships, one-on-one encouragement, building that inner connectivity that makes life worthwhile. Debba is what one of my grandsons called me. And so Debba was easy to say, looking at the future, I already have ALS. What can I do to make a difference? And so once a month, we send out, we call them Warriors of Hope boxes. And they always come with a handwritten note and a information sheet that says, hey, that'd be great. You can just pull all the stuff out if you want. This is the one that went out last month, right around Easter. And it has, you have to take the money out. Okay. Okay. That kind, energizing bunny will never heal ALS, but you all laughed and you all smiled, and that was the goal. There's cotton candy and jelly beans, and again, a note that says, we're praying for you, we love you, we care about you, you're not alone. And so that's how we work with it. We have an empathy dinner coming up in a week and a half. And again, no one will take action unless they know what they need to know and they have the education to understand how they can make a difference. And so that's how we work. That's what keeps me going every day. And does that answer the question? Randy's turn.
I think the bunny may have won all panels.
I think so.
Randy, I think, is he up? Ready?
My apologies to the community for not being present in person to participate. A challenge associated with ALS has me on the sidelines. Fortunately, the advances in technology has given me the opportunity to participate. The fight for life and bringing an end to ALS is my motivation to advocate for ALS. Regardless of the political climate, the fight against ALS is a priority. As a PALS, putting a face to the challenges that we endure motivates me to be a voice against the funding cuts aimed at medical research. Though the cuts I am fighting for are specific to my health challenges, the overall impact will touch every American and people from around the world fighting a variety of diseases. Are we not given life to help one another and not for our personal agendas?
Thank you. I'm going to go look at our medical professionals now and ask, as medical professionals, what is giving you hope at this moment?
Well, what you talked about, Rick, gives me hope. I think talking about hope and talking about strengths when we see people living with challenging diseases in the clinic keeps me going as a clinician, because now I'm relating to them in so many different levels. And that's a reciprocity that keeps, I think, every physician going, I hope. Also, I think these are really obviously challenging times politically. And there's so many problems that seem so impossible to solve, including ALS sometimes. But the idea of acting globally and thinking globally and acting both globally and locally kind of keeps me going. So there's things that I can do right now in my own clinic, and we can do in ALS clinics across the country, to bring, this is my real hope, bringing patients and families and clinicians together. There's so many ways in which we're separated from one another or isolated from one another, and that is a death knell for both of us, for all of us. So a patient and we at UVA, Jim and I started a patient and family advisory group that partners with staff and faculty to solve problems together that face the clinic, that neither one of us has been able to solve by ourselves. But when you put those voices together, you can almost do anything. I mean, you get a totally different reception from leadership when you're showing up as a patient, family member, and staff members, and they're like, whoa, this must be something we need to listen to. Whereas if we go separately, they can diss us in a variety of ways or just not get it, And I think that's also true on a larger scale at the national level. When we show up together, with whether it's researchers, clinicians, patients, families, when we show up together, it's a completely different level of power that we have. So despite the challenges, I do feel like we're starting to come together as all those groups and realize the power we have. And maybe that's out of necessity. Like if things aren't easy, you got to figure out how to band together or you won't survive. And maybe these hard times and certainly this heart disease has stimulated us to come together in a whole new way. It's also probably going to stimulate, like Garrett was saying, different pathways through. So when someone puts a wall in front of me anyway, I'm looking for where's the brick in that wall that's a little shaky that I wasn't even looking at before, but now that becomes a real opportunity. Maybe it's, a new pathway, a conditional pathway that we've never been willing to address. There are all other kinds of third rails that we haven't been able to address, like the cost of medications. Why couldn't a conditional pathway also include pricing that would be just for the conditional. Why is that a third rail? Why can't we? So maybe it's environmental influences on this disease that we really haven't paid attention to, but now we've got a different group, in power that maybe for some reason, maybe not the right reasons, but some reasons, more interested in environment and diet. And so let's take advantage of that. So I do see a lot of things that give me hope as an individual clinician and as an advocate.
Well, I guess I'll start with this pink suit. Yeah. No, I mean, there's some really cool work going on to subtype ALS. I think that's kind of, to me, where I see the excitement in the next 5 years. And I mean, I talked about what we've been able to do with tofersen for the one subtype of ALS that we really understand well. But I do feel like we're going to understand more subtypes in the next 5 years. I think with these natural history studies and all the data that they're gathering and the use of tools like AI, we're going to have, in the next 5 years, at least 10, 12 subsets of non-genetic ALS where we understand the combination of things that led to it. And that's going to allow us to have a much better likelihood of more home run therapies. I mean, in my own clinic, I feel like I have my first theories about why some people do so much better than others, why some people progress so slowly. Found something in their gut microbiome that's very exciting that we can transfer to mouse models and slow the progression. So we just yesterday got FDA approval to move forward with a special fecal transplant trial that we're going to be doing at Duke. I'm excited about that. And in the subtype of 62 people that I know of that really got ALS, progressed and then recovered from it, the so-called ALS reversals, I've discovered a target that might explain why some of them got better. And it's never been thought to be involved in ALS, but I now have multiple studies that we've done since then that suggest it really is a promising target. And we've got a supplement that we're going to put into a trial to try to knock that target down, see if we can reverse ALS. And then you'll see one last jacket from me on Instagram with the molecular structure of that supplement on the back, waving goodbye.
Okay, I'm going to combine some of these questions because you've all started to head in this direction a little bit anyway. Garrett, you mentioned promising pathways as a possible opportunity. Maybe the environment, Peggy, you mentioned might be something that's an opportunity. What are some other opportunities might we have with a new administration, and what obstacles might we encounter, do you think?
Yeah, I think some of this came up in my answer to the follow-up question. I think obstacles are the inertia right now behind attempts to trim the federal budget, to cut funding seemingly arbitrarily at, well, just everywhere, and how that puts us on the back foot a little bit in trying to fight for the funding we've already secured and know that we're in the midst of appropriations asking for more funding, and relying on our champions on the Hill who did miraculously come through for us on preserving the ALS research program within CDMRP at the Pentagon. And we're so grateful to those legislators who wrote to the agency and were impressed by I think the program manager with CDMRP that did specify, yes, the ALS research funding will stay there. We'll keep that $40 million for current fiscal year, and so that sets us up well for our FY26 appropriation requests. But it's a big obstacle to know that ALS, as many correctly say, is not an impossible disease to treat, to cure, to investigate. It's just underfunded, and the national posture right now is not to spend more money on science and research. And so we need to in our own, I think, local spaces talk to folks that think it's in their interest to cut federal spending, and explain to them how no, there's lots of things that merit support from the federal government financially, and that ALS is a complete and total market failure. and that without the grants, without the research, without the expanded access programs, that ALS is not to put this in appropriately, but dead in the water. That we need that, we rely on that. So that's a big obstacle, but we do have, I think, the opportunity of using some of the energy that's out there right now in the public for to maybe in an Addy Barkin style, get out there and protest if that's your avenue, if that's the way that you punch through bricks in the wall. We have opportunities with friends that we have within Republican circles or within the administration that were not there because they were not in power. And so there might be some back channeling, some connections that we can leverage that can get things done that weren't possible in a liberal administration. So there are opportunities. We do have to look for them, and I think if anyone can overcome obstacles in the government, it's going to be the ALS community that got the Act for ALS done in the words of Dan Tate, in record-breaking time and pace. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just make one comment about this. So, in just trying to understand what's been happening, it seems to me that there's this wave of nationalism. I mean, the very slogan, "Make America Great Again," right? I think we all want America to be great, but I think we need to double down on the idea that one of the things that makes us a world leader, that people look to us from all over, is our research. I mean, we found tofersen. We found the first home run in the history of ALS. Everyone around the world is looking at this with their jaws open, we need to double down on this. We all want America to be great, but let's remember that research is part of what makes us the greatest country in the world.
What do you all think about the role of states now? I mean, not just maybe that the federal government isn't going to come through or is going to cut funding that has been there before, but just the chaos at the federal level. Anybody have any thoughts about, should we be paying more attention to states? And how do we do that well? When we go state by state, there's also chaos that happens because states aren't doing it all the same.
I'm no expert or anything, but I think our states are going to have enough problems on their hands with education and Medicare and infrastructure. If we throw ALS at them as well, how much attention are we going to get?
We're a force.
I'm a child of the 60s. I know how to make noise.
Yeah, this is where I wish that Nicole was here in the room and could talk about, I think she's had some success at the state level. But no, I think it's a genuine question that we should spend some time looking at, because we are a republic and we have, 50 states that who knows what opportunities are there. And would really welcome insight and feedback from the community about how to make that pivot successfully.
I want to make sure to include Randy again. He did get these questions, so I'm going to tee him up here for the next question. Why do you stay involved in advocacy? So I'll wait, but Deb, you can have that question while we get Randy set up.
Well, at the risk of being not politically correct, I've never done anything half-assed in my life, and I'm not going to start now. I stay involved because I look at 6,000 flags in the field and say that has to change. I'd say Lou Gehrig died in 1941, and I was given the same options and diagnosis he was. America is and can be amazingly great, and we have the ability to make a difference in ALS, and it hasn't been done. And so, like I said, I know how to make noise, and She might be little, but she's fierce. And that's why I stay involved.
Is Randy's there?
I stay involved with advocating for ALS because God did not create me to quit. I refuse to let ALS win. Being part of this amazing community, a team fighting to end ALS, we all have a role in the fight. I am doing my best to fill my role.
So here's one that actually came out of some of our experiences the past couple of days while we've been meeting with folks on the Hill. Given that one party controls Congress and the White House, how can those not in power assist the ALS community?
I think that if you're not the party in power, maybe it could be a little easier for you to help the ALS community because then you can say yes a lot more often, right? Like, yes, I'll support this. Yes, if this bill comes to the floor, I'll vote. Yeah, I'll co-sponsor that because your exposure is a little limited, right? But I think, more seriously, like you can still join the ALS caucus. You can still meet with constituents. You can look for legislative solutions to bring when your party is back in control. I think about things we've accomplished in the past, like the SSDI bill or the Elizabeth Dole home care package, or right now an existing bill, Justice for ALS Veterans. Those are all like legislative fixes to existing law. And if lawmakers and their staff can do some research while they have this downtime in the minority to learn about things that they can work on in the code, the US code, then yeah, do that research now so that after the midterms, you can hit the ground running and we can get some of these things introduced and move them quickly. I think that, of course, Democrats have a presence in committee hearings, and they can, they can be trying to hold agency officials accountable through the questions they raise, through the guests and the witnesses they invite. They can try to, make speeches, make activity, make good trouble and noise outside of Capitol Hill and be in their district and be doing things that show people with ALS and other groups in need that they are in solidarity with them, and that then when they do have political power, they can spend that capital and fulfill some of the promises that hopefully they can make now when, again, in my opinion, they have a little bit of room and some more time to do this groundwork when they're not in the controlling position. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I also think they have a lot of influence at the state level, that they can do things through their colleagues at the state level that can be extraordinarily helpful. And just they have a microphone, even if they're not in power, they have a huge microphone to just spread awareness and start to spread some compassion in all of this. So I think there's a lot they can do.
Use the microphone, Julie.
Hi, everybody. Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Julie. Yesterday we had some really great meetings with lots of ALS champions. And one of the things they asked us was to continue growing our network. So in people, whether they are in red states, blue states, purple states, to continue raising our voices so that there's more people telling their elected officials, no matter what party they're in, that they have a voice. And so using that, so asking people, like if you know anybody in red states, to continue asking for that kind of help and telling them how they can get involved and building those relationships. So it's not just thank you for doing this, but can you also help and reach out to another person in a different state and sign up to join our constituent list and start to build that relationship? so that even though we are constituents and we're not elected officials, we can build our network and continue to raise that point. So they were lovely and very nice, and they're huge champions of us, but they asked for our help to continue to get more people on the train with us. So here, everybody, we've got work to do.
I think it's
Someone else
also,
want- go ahead.
I think it's also worth remembering that ALS is about as nonpartisan an issue as you can get. And we've shown that before. We just need to be really loud about it right now.
I agree completely. And the other thing that has impressed me over and over again as I've talked to people is you never know who's been affected by ALS. I live in Huntington, West Virginia. Brad Smith is the president of Marshall University. He's also the developer of, help me, QuickBooks. He is the richest person in West Virginia, second year running. His nephew died of ALS. He's a huge supporter. And we don't know that until we have the conversation. And so talking, yes, it's important to go on the Hill. Yes, it's important to do all those things, but having one-on-one conversations makes a difference as well.
I think I saw a few other comments, questions over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, to add to this anecdotal information that you just added, yesterday on the Hill, a Democrat from California who is a genetic carrier of ALS met with a Republican's assistant, and the Republican representative was not necessarily sympathetic to my cause or our cause in general. And it turned out that the assistant's fiance had just died of SOD1 ALS. And it's a super sad story, but like, you know, the fact that I'm a genetic carrier, you know, I have a rare form of a rare disease, and she's working for somebody who I perceive as the enemy. I mean, she went straight to that representative and told him to get his act together. So, yeah.
Can you hear me? Is it my, okay. Just kind of piggybacking off of that, I just wanted to also kind of share, I was on the Hill on Wednesday, and before even going into each meeting, I did a lot of research on the people I was talking to. And I also think, you know, like the saying ALS is nonpartisan is huge, because if we approach it less of like, we're up against a fight of them not being supportive of what we're looking to do, and more of a collaborative effort of how we can get them to join our team, I think it can really help break down the divisiveness. And so, for example, I'm from Virginia, and a lot of the research that I was doing was looking into how much of the population were veterans, and sharing the statistics of how ALS is twice as likely to affect veterans. I found that a lot of the more Republican representatives and senators that I was meeting with were a lot more responsive to what I was having to say when I came in educated with those types of statistics. And then kind of what you were saying earlier in regards to empathy, I think we're not necessarily looking for sympathy when we share our stories, but more so empathy. And so if we can find a way that they can connect to the story that we're sharing, even if they haven't directly been impacted by ALS, I think that can help to encourage them to make it something that should be important regardless of their stance politically. So I just wanted to share that.
Tracy, I have a question from the chat. This is from Pat. What are the most effective ways to connect with your representatives? For example, email, call, tweet, etc.
Deb is saying yes. Do all the things. Town halls are really popular right now, or at least they were. You can pull a Becky Murray and get into a town hall. But I think if you're not getting a response by email, we usually say make those phone calls to the district office or multiple district offices. Try the DC office. I don't have any authority as to like the best way to get in touch, but I think that they like to give you this little contact form on their website that you can use. And I tell people don't ever use that because I don't think you get much out of it. But, organizations like ALS, we do, have our own eternal archive or list of staff contact information for various portfolio issues. And so we frequently know who the legislative assistant is that covers health policy or healthcare. And so, talk with someone at ALS if you need an email address, or if you are not getting a response. This is a grassroots movement, and so we can all work together in trying to get meetings scheduled, get you on a Zoom call, and get you some FaceTime with the office.
Juan has something to say, something right.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment to channel my mentor and friend, Brian Wallach, and share with you 3 points that you have brought to mind. One is that we need to take this time as a community for research and advocacy and take the pause to reflect on any missteps that we may have taken overall in the past. Reflect on those and pivot to address the current atmosphere. We cannot lose hope with respect to being able to continue to move forward. 2, we cannot discount the states for the states or the germination of our elected leaders at the federal level. So if we begin to engage in their use of their profession, we can condition them to be receptive to our needs in the future when they reach those levels. Thirdly, as a community, we cannot lose hope because hope is the only thing that ties us together. Hope is the genetic bond that connects us all in the ALS family. Thank you for your time today.
I really wanted to quickly come back to the way that the party that is not in the majority can come beside the ALS community. I think that most of us probably had the experience where the person sitting across from us during our Hill meeting saying, "You're preaching to the choir. We're right there with you." However, there's an opportunity to provide that person with a story or a concrete example that they can then use and bring to these Senate meetings or House meetings and be able to show real world proof of the impact of pieces of legislation or attempts to cut funding in different areas across the government. I also think that it's important to note that these people who are in the minority still work for us. And if you are having a complication with getting government resources, say in Medicare or Medicaid, or are having an issue with just service locally on a more personal level, call up your office. They're going to help you. Make a stink about it, because there's an opportunity for them to call up the local, for example, Medicaid office and say, why is there an issue with this person getting access to whatever they need? And so they can help bridge the gap. And while it might not be in a legislative platform that they're providing assistance to you, they are still a resource and can help bridge the gap in care a little bit when it's not necessarily legislative, but more in an administrative manner as well.
Okay, I have a few more questions here. And this kind of goes what we were just saying about so stories and empathy about, we know that very often we can present data and we can show pie charts and graphs and all that, but it doesn't really pull at the heartstrings like an actual personal story. Do you think there are different stories that would resonate now at this particular time than we've used before? Or I like to think about it, if you always do what you've always done, you're going to always get what you always got. So how do we sort of change the narrative, or do we do something a little differently?
Yeah, I would just come back to a couple things that I've said. I mean, we have success stories now, and these are looked at all over the world as just inspiring. So let's play on the nationalism, and let's play on the fact that we took the resources over the last few years and we basically hit a home run with one form of ALS. And now we have a path forward. We know what tools we need to use to hit more home runs. We just need support from our leadership.
Along those lines, Rick, are there stories that we can start telling from the EAPs, or is it too early? Because those are threatened in many ways. So
yeah, so I saw the most amazing talk in December. It was the Stephen Hawking Memorial Lecture. So it's a lecture I look forward to seeing every year at the International Symposium. And it was actually by a lawyer from Montreal who runs a group called Science Up First. And he talked about, this crisis that we're in, where half the world's population has lost confidence in science. And, he showed sort of how he thought this happened. But then he showed the tools that were being used to spread information and destroy scientific credibility. And instead of saying, woe is me, we need to double down on, publications in peer-reviewed journals, he said, if we want to reach that half of the world that's lost faith, we need to see the tools that influence them, and we need to use those tools. So we need to get influencers on our side, movie stars and athletes. We need to be able to tell anecdotes that inspire people. And we have real anecdotes from Tofferson, but I mean, certainly there are people who are in those EAPs who are doing well. Now, as a scientist, do I know for sure that the reason they're doing well is because of what they're taking? I don't, but that's okay. It's an anecdote of someone who's doing extremely well, and that improvement in their course correlates with them starting something in an EAP. It's a story that's worth telling because it's going to make a dent in that group of people who are influenced by those kinds of anecdotes.
Can I jump in here on the stories idea? So I've been for the last 6 months trying to come up with a new campaign for Fight to End ALS. We put out those amazing videos that were very impactful, and they were too difficult for people to watch, and it just didn't really connect with people. In one of my latest Artistry of ALS interviews, I ask this question at the end of every interview: is there something you would ask me that I did not ask you? And I was asked, what would you do if you were diagnosed with ALS today? And so I think that's what my campaign is going to be. I'm going to start asking that question of people and see what their answer is. And I want to ask that question of everyone, because if we don't make it personal, people aren't going to care.
Do you have a question in the back, Joyce?
So it's a question and a comment. One of the things that it's green.
When it's green, and then hold it to your mouth.
So I have a question and a comment. So one, I was wondering whether we could do what all the politicians have been lately doing, coming to the opposite, to the other party and talking about how the government actually helped us a few years ago when the Republican Party was, when President Trump actually signed the Right to Try Act. So kind of like basically talking about that and giving kudos to that and saying, hey, the president helped us then. Can the president now, or can the party now? And I might be just stating the obvious, but if we can use that as a tool to move forward and talk to the Republican offices that we go to if they're not receptive to what we are saying. And the second comment I had was, this may go to all the physicians here, is basically, do we have any data that states any of the patients that did do Right to Try and what was their stories and whether that has helped? And maybe we can use that as a tool also in giving a different perspective or a new perspective on things.
Well, I mean, I do like the idea of tapping into the impetus for Right to Try. I mean, to be able to say that, we have a president who clearly recognizes the need to get treatments into the hands of people with rare diseases, even if the treatments are not 100% guaranteed to work. I would be a little bit careful about saying too much about the Right to Try law itself, because I think it was a bust. I only know of one person with ALS who ever got anything under Right to Try. The problem with Right to Try is it sounds a lot better than it actually is. Like, of course, most people feel the same way that folks with difficult diseases should have the ability to get products, but it sort of targeted the FDA as the reason why patients can't get products, and that never really was the reason. The main reason was the companies didn't want to give their products away. And the doctors were conservative and were leery about putting themselves out there and getting an experimental product in the hands of their patients when they didn't really understand that much about it. And that law did nothing for either one of those two barriers. Those were the barriers. In fact, if anything, because Right to Try removed some oversight, it said the FDA is not involved. Companies can just give this as long as a doctor is willing to sign off that they're going to administer it. That made doctors even more nervous. So it made them even less likely to want to work down that pathway. So, I mean, EAP is a much better pathway. It doesn't take away the oversight that most of us feel more comfortable having. But I think the spirit of what you're saying is spot on. Like, we gotta ask ourselves, what are the themes that we know about in this regime? And how do we tap into those themes to make them work for us? So I said nationalism. America is great because we lead the world in research. Look at the success we had with tofersen. The president wants to get drugs into the hands of people with rare diseases, maybe sooner than we've been able to. So let's talk about how we do that with promising pathways. Like, tapping into those themes, I think, makes tons of sense.
Play into the ego.
I also think it's fair to say telling some positive stories, I think, is something that really can help us. ALS can be kind of a Debbie Downer disease, and people want to not hear about it. So telling some stories that, wow, this is a very exciting time, which it is. Getting people excited about the research that is like right here, I think that's a great idea.
And using the influencers. I mean, think about what happened with the Ice Bucket Challenge. The reason why it went viral, the first two guys who did it, they had small social networks, but in those social networks, there were members of the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox and Tom Brady. So when they got involved, that's when the Ice Bucket Challenge exploded, right? So surely we know that there are people who are living with ALS who are connected to influencers. For example, Steve Gleason is great friends with Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam is world-renowned, millions of followers on Instagram. Imagine what it would mean if Pearl Jam came out and said, we're so excited that Steve could come to our concert And the reason he was able to come was all this technology that we figured out a way for him to be able to continue to participate in life. Like people be like, holy cow, that's amazing that he was still able to come and do this. And there must be an influencer who knows somebody with SOD1 ALS who did well on tofersen, or somebody who did well in an EAP. To have that person introduce the story, all of a sudden, instead of thousands, you're talking about tens of millions of people who are listening. So you got to, like that guy said in the Stephen Hawking lecture, you got to use the tools that are not being used by scientists right now. We've got to understand what the other side is doing and use those tools.
I'm going to kind of play off of that about speaking about the positive things. So, and this is kind of for anyone. Looking at the success of ACT for ALS, what do you think we can learn and how do we model what happened to get that to pass? What are the steps we need to do to make next piece of legislation as successful as ACT for ALS? We're all looking at you, Garrett.
I've been wondering a lot what the lightning in a bottle was for ACT for ALS, because I don't know how it just felt like all of a sudden everyone woke up and it was like, wait, we can do something about this? Like we can tell Congress to provide money that gives access to treatments through expanded access. Like I remember when I went to watch a screening of I think it's called For Love and Life now, the documentary. At the time it was the No Ordinary Campaign was the title. And I tried to ask, because they did a Q&A afterwards, like who wrote that bill? Like who came up with the concept? I want to know, because that just really was, I think, a catalyst of having this idea that could be communicated to people and families that didn't come across as too technical, that people couldn't grasp, but they could see the material effect it would have. And then having so many ALS organizations and Facebook groups and people across the country just like really catch on fire to what could happen if the ACT for ALS made it through. And so those are my cons. I don't have the answer, but I think that we need to replicate it over and over again.
Well, some of the secret sauce is in this room, right?
Doesn't it also seem like for a while, everyone in the ALS community was united around that bill? Like it seemed to me for a year, every patient advocacy group, so many of our most powerful voices were focused on that one thing. And it just seems a lot different. I mean, I've been on the Hill many times, and it seemed like when we were asking for one thing, like I remember the year we went, all we were asking for is the National Registry. Everyone, 1,000 of us, went to Congress and we asked, can we get a National Registry? And this is why we need it. And we got it. But I think when we go in there and there's 100 different things that we're asking for, the message just gets lost. I mean, everybody, when you go to lobby Congress, you stand in line. The person in front of you is asking for something and the person behind you is asking for something, and they're all good things. And like the power that we used to have is the whole community rallied around one or two issues every year. And I just feel like that's not really happening right now. We all have different things that we're asking for. I mean, I think there has to be an agreement amongst the major advocacy groups in the space that we're going to focus on one thing for the next year. I feel like we got a much better chance of getting one thing than we do of getting 15 things.
I will just add, I think that some of that is starting to change, just as several organizations are with IMALS. We are collaborating in a way that I haven't seen before. 30 plus organizations signed the appropriation letter to Congress, right? And I think a large group of advocacy folks are meeting every 2 weeks to discuss exactly what you're talking about. What are we going to focus on, and what's going to get through? And we all bring different aspects and different pieces of those legislations to the table, but I think you're exactly right. I think the force is mighty if we focus on one thing. So walking in and not having everyone say, oh, we think we should have 10 million here. We have 30 million here. And we want, everybody came in and said, these are our 4 requests. It's all the same dollar amount, right? So they weren't like, well, wait, this organization said 5 million. Why are you saying 10 million? So I think change is also slow sometimes, but I think we're on the right track.
I mean, they're all good ideas. Don't get me wrong. It's not that people are going and advocating for something that's a terrible idea. It's just, I think we have to realize right now it's crisis time. We have to batten down the hatches and say, what are the 1 or 2 most important things we need to hold on to or get in the next year? And we all got to get behind that.
I would just add, we are planning a webinar soon and more education around Act for ALS 1.0 and how that came to be and how the entire community rallied around it and the success story that it is, because it is critical that we all understand how to message those successes and the impact and don't get in the way of the potential for reauthorization, which I think is a very real fear of all of ours. And we are all working together to focus on what those asks are going to be. And now we're working across the neurodegenerative community so that we're not going in as different diseases and becoming each other's noise. So more to come on all of this.
So when we were meeting with them on the positive note, the first thing I did was I started by thanking the legislators on both sides for passing Act for ALS. And then I gave our personal story of my husband, Eric, and how he was diagnosed with ALS in March of 2020 before the Act for ALS passed. And when he was diagnosed, his breathing was at 63%. And he was told by his doctor, we need you on a BiPAP immediately. Immediately, you need to be on a BiPAP. And at that point, before the Act for ALS, it was $1,000 a month for the BiPAP. And we were like, okay, we can do $1,000 a month. And I asked his neurologist, and this is what I told the legislators. I said, we asked the neurologist, well, what happens to people who don't have $1,000 a month, which is many people? And the neurologist told us, well, they just don't breathe and they die more quickly. And I said, and then you guys passed the Act for ALS. And now everyone has a right to breathe, right? We all have a right to breathe. So thank you so much on both sides to them for passing the act. And I think giving them a thank you, everybody wants to feel like they did something good. And if they did something good and we thank them for it, they're more likely to do more good things. And especially things that were home runs. They hit a home run. So that was just one example of one of the things that we took a personal story and related it to the legislation that had passed.
I love that you were focused on the positive. Just as you were speaking, it reminded me of this amazing Martin Luther King quote, one of my absolute favorite quotes. I'm never going to remember the whole thing, but it's the gist of it is, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And so what if we all got together and we said, the narrative is going to change. We're not going to go and we're not going to tell sad stories of what we don't have. We're going to tell positive stories of what we've been able to accomplish and say, with the resources you've given us in the last few years, look at the amazing things that we're doing. Isn't this worth continuing to invest in? Isn't this an American success story? What a message that would send.
I gave Deb and Randy
sorry, can I jump in? Because there's somebody on chat.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure Randy gets to go again.
Okay, good.
But go ahead
Thank
and
you.
do the chat. So Randy, you can tee up. I'll just let him know. There was a third question for Deb and Randy. Has being diagnosed with ALS changed your perspective on hope? But okay, go ahead and do the chat question.
I'm assuming you're meaning Pat's comment, Rachel. I can't see her now. I'm just gonna read it. The Act for ALS, sorry, I can't, hold on, my computer's being funny. The Act for ALS got passed was due, or the fact that ALS Act for ALS got passed was due to the entire ALS community and organizations working together. We have to get back to focus on what Dr. Bedlack said. So that was the comment.
Deb, do you want to take this third question? We'll wait for Randy to get Randy teed up there. And that was, has being diagnosed with ALS changed your perspective on hope?
I would say no, it has not changed my perspective, but it certainly has emphasized it and made me realize just how critical it is to have a foundation that you can stand on, that you can say, and this is why I have hope. This is why I do what I do. That hasn't changed. But some days we all need a reminder. And I'm not a Pollyanna. There are people in the room that can attest to the fact that not every day is sunshine and flowers. But I use the analogy of it's like having a list of to-dos. When I get off track of my list of to-dos, I know where to go back to start again. And so when I run out of hope or everything looks very dark, or I'm in PMS mode, which in my world is poor-me syndrome, I have a place to go to get back to hope.
Is Randy ready?
No, it has created more hope. Nothing great is accomplished without hope.
Good. Just have like one or two more questions here as we get ready to close out for the day. This might be for you, Dr. Bedlack, but I think anyone else can handle or answer this. How do you handle the online discourse and disinformation around politics and the ALS advocacy priorities? Or how do we separate fact from fiction?
Well, I mean, I think that those of us that are trained in science, and we're trying to make that happen more often with our research ambassadors, giving them some tools that they can use to fact check things. We have to not be afraid to take a stand. And there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be trolls. I mean, I could post the most positive story and I get 2 or 3 trolls just about every time. And the nice thing is there's a little block button. You just block that person and they're gone from your social media. So I just think if we believe in this, we can't be afraid to take a stand on it. And we have to realize that when you take a stand, not everyone's going to love it. There's going to be some people that disagree and hate it. And you just have to move on. But if you believe it at the end of the day, you can sleep easy.
Garrett, or anything you want to talk about disinformation or stuff that maybe is being said about ALS that isn't true? And then how do you get folks to know your opinion is one thing and fact is another, right? Like we hear this very often. Well, that's just your opinion. No, it's a fact.
Yeah, I think as applied to ALS, I'm actually a little somehow insulated or disconnected from a lot of the online discourse. My brother and his wife were much more plugged into, I think the digital community than I am, and so I don't have specific recommendations when it comes to ALS disinformation or deciphering fact from opinion or false hope versus, legitimate hope. But in my experience as an immigration lawyer, I encounter a lot of immigration disinformation. So if you allow me to pull from that for a moment, I think there's this idea that I've heard from a religious talk that I've appropriated into my online activity is that we should all try to be stone catchers and not stone throwers. So social media, right, is set up so that it's always people talking to each other in a way that is against each other, trying to throw rocks or prove that you know better, that you're right, that they're wrong, that they're, that they're a bad person, that they don't have as much credibility to you. And that's just a lot of throwing stones. And so when we see that behavior and when we find ourselves in that mode, no one is immune from human nature and tribalism. Like we just need to start trying to catch the rocks instead of throwing them. And I observed this really interesting interaction on Twitter once where a reporter from my home state of Utah was talking about how he was shifting from the campaign beat after the election to working on food and agricultural policy. And there was someone who posted, well, basically good riddance. Your politics and your personal bias were such an embarrassment to the state of Utah. And I know this person that they're talking about personally, and it's like, oh wow, I wonder what he's going to say in response to that. The tea has been spilled. But he really impressed me. He came back and he just said to this person that posted that thing that, hey, I saw once that your daughter is serving a mission, and that's incredible for her, and what a great accomplishment that says a lot about your family, and I wish you the best, and have a good life. And so sometimes it's certainly appropriate to just block, mute, whatever, like cut out the negativity. We ain't got time for that in ALS land. But I just thought that was a nice moment of catching the stone instead of throwing one. And maybe we don't all have the strength for that every day, but I think maybe that's another hope boosting activity is trying to catch stones that are being thrown at people. And no leader or organization is going to be perfect at this. I know in the ALS community, there have been rifts and there has been tension and there have been hurt feelings. And I hope that this year and every year we can all get a little bit closer to feeling like we are in unity at the trauma bonding that we all go through with this disease, and that we can offer forgiveness and grace to each other, even when we might have differences of opinion about how to best move the ball forward.
Randy has one more comment when we're ready for Randy.
And while Randy is getting ready, I might also want to share my video that I had submitted. Meaning to say have the video ready, but let's let Randy go first and then.
In my opinion, effective collaboration between PALs, caregivers, medical professionals, and advocacy organizations looks like educating the communities impacted by ALS and the populations around the US and world not yet impacted by ALS about what clinical research is and its importance, specifically the information gathered from historical studies and the critical need for research funding.
Yes, thank you. Did you have a video that you wanted to show? I'll ask this question for you all to think about while we get ready for the video, right? Because this will kind of close this out. What are your thoughts about ALS advocacy in the long term over the next 5 to 10 years? Is there value in planning for future results? And if so, what does that look like? You have a few minutes to think about it.
Well, so this video that I sent in is only 30 seconds long, so I might have us watch it once and then I'll add some commentary and then we can watch it again, but I'll tie it to this question and sort of the theme of advocacy in uncertain times.
All right, you ready, Carter? Hey, walk. Woo! Right, left. It's so great. Woo! Nice job. Nice.
Okay, so I'll comment and then we can watch it again so you can fully appreciate what's happening there. So I come from a family of 6 boys. Ryan, my brother that died of ALS, is the one just younger than me. So he's the 4th son. And we grew up always going to Oceanside, California and boogie boarding as our family vacation. That was like the thing we would do during the summers. And so, of course, after Ryan got ALS and we were asking what does Ryan want to do now that he has this what felt like an expiration date on his life. And well, we want to go to Oceanside and we want Ryan to boogie board again. So what you're seeing is the POV of a GoPro camera on one brother's on his forehead who's riding next to Ryan. Then you have me and my older brother standing next to Ryan. And as the wave comes, we would push him into the wave so that he could, because with boogie boarding, you're not really, you're deep in enough that you can kind of just propel, but really you're just trying to time it right that you're moving with the momentum of the wave. And then, we have another brother that's there for safety. If Ryan goes belly up, that he can dive in and retrieve him. So now let's try to watch again and see what happens when all of us working together try to get Ryan to boogie board again.
All right, you ready, Carter? Hey, walk. Woo! Right, left. It's so great. Woo! Nice job. Nice.
So that was not a first try success, right? It took many waves. It took many times of Ryan coming in and okay, it's not working. And sometimes we would get him on the wave, but then the brother with the camera didn't catch the wave. And well, no, let's do it again. We want to document this. And so all this coordination, all this collaboration, all of us working together, performing different roles, is what got us that smile and got us that laugh. And I think about all of the people we saw in the In Memoriam video and all the individuals we talked about during the awards ceremony who've done amazing things. And over the next 5 and 10 years, we just need to keep finding people who can work together and do small but important pieces of this issue. And it's such a paradox because I don't want anyone else to have to suffer with ALS, but we got to replace the ones that we lose along the way and enroll new allies in this course. And I am so excited to see over the next 5 to 10 years who else is going to come into the circle and who else is going to wear crazy, hopeful fashion and who else is going to be a medical expert and who else is going to have a relationship to someone in the administration or on the Hill to be part of advocating in uncertain times because we don't know what waves are coming behind us. We don't know what direction the winds are. We can just respond to what's happening and work together to all lift where we stand and make the small pushes that we can together.
We have a question, so go ahead.
I just wanted to comment when you said who else. Don't underestimate the how fierce the young generation is. There is a huge community of us just in the online community that I created of young adults affected by ALS in some way. In less than a year, we have over 300 members, and we're fierce, and we're coming. We're coming up too, and so the voices of us exist as well. And kind of alongside of that, I did want to mention something. I think this is where my advocacy with mental health does overlap with my advocacy work with ALS. And I completely agree that leading with gratitude and hope for all that we've accomplished so far is so important. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that embracing vulnerability and sharing our stories, even when it makes people uncomfortable, is so important. And young people aren't afraid to do that. I believe that joy is just as important as sadness because they have things to teach. And we can honor our loss and our anger and our grief and use that to fuel moving forward. And so I think hope is really created by shining a light on the darkness too, not ignoring it. I just wanted to mention that because I feel when I talk a lot to younger people like myself, a lot of us are turning our stories and our pain into purpose. And so that is founded by hope, but a lot of it exists in the stories and the suffering, the trauma that we've gone through. And at-risk individuals are carrying a weight every day. It is urgent and we need to push hard. And so yes, hope is important, but also value and embrace your vulnerability because it's a part of your story and advocacy too.
So that pretty much closes out our panel discussion for advocacy on uncertain times.
Let's give Randy a chance just to finish. Is
Yeah,
that okay? He had
yeah.
one more thing he wanted
yeah.
to say. Randy, if you're ready.
Thank you all. Great discussion. Safe travels.
You're awesome, Randy.
Big thank you to our panelists and to Tiffany for moderating. All right, well, I think that concludes our 2025 summit. Thank you all so much for being here. I am walking away so energized, and I hope all of you will hold on to that energy. We have a lot of work to do, and we owe it to the community of people who were here with us this week and those who couldn't be here with us this week. So please hold on to that energy. So many of you are already involved and are leaders, but if you're thinking about getting involved, if you're thinking about offering support as a mentor or getting a mentor, any of the things, there are so many ways to get involved with IMALS and our partner organizations. Reach out if you don't know how to do that and you're just thinking about how you can fit in, we can support. Please feel free to post on social media and share our content and use the ALS Awareness Month hashtags. And thank you again for the staff and volunteer organizers and our hosts at Hogan Lovells and our sponsors.